I do have time for an introduction. Let's go ahead and get into it. Hey everybody, my name is Trey. For those of y'all who do not know me, I want to welcome you to my YouTube channel. If this is your first time, I want you guys to hit that like, subscribe button. I do have a lot of stories that are on this channel, but a lot more on my TikTok channel. I am going to be updating everything very soon. I don't know what else to really say from here. You know, I'm not really a big person for talking too much, at least for introductions, that is. Oh, I do have a lot of things to tell you guys, and I'm probably going to tell you guys over a live, not on this video, because I don't have time for all that. But I want to thank y'all for actually being with me today. I want to thank y'all for following with me, and I love you guys. I really do, more than you guys understand. I really do appreciate you. So thank you. Oh, how am I going to do this? Because I've already recorded part 1 on TikTok. So I'm going to go ahead and put the TikTok video first. And then I'm going to go the extra recorded video behind it, which is going to say part 2. And then it's just going to conclude. So thank you guys. Let's go ahead and get into it. No time for an introduction. Let's go ahead and get into it. Welcome to part 4 of our October horror stories. In the late 90s, Madeline Carmichael lived in her Brownsville apartment in Brooklyn, New York. She had lived here for about 20 years, but she had a bit of a problem. One of the neighbors in these side apartments next to her, they had a child. And all hours of the night, this child would be crying and screaming, and it was non-stop. It got to the point where she couldn't even get any sleep because this baby was crying throughout all hours of the night. So like everybody else who was fed up, Madeline will file a complaint with the building supervisor. During her complaint, she would always tell them, there is a child that is constantly crying. I need you to talk to these people to get this baby to shut up. After she would file these complaints, the supervisor would come up to her apartment to try to hear what Madeline was hearing. But time and time again, there was nothing to be heard. So the supervisor would come in, he would try to figure out where this noise was coming from, but like every other time prior to, he couldn't figure out who had a baby. No one had a baby around. So he would just leave and he would tell her, look, if you're having any more problems, just come back and let me know and we're going to see what we can do about it. And then Madeline will call the next day. Same situation. The supervisor would come, he would check it out, he would try to hear where this baby was calling from, but he could not find a child. And so he was completely dumbfounded. And this went on for months. And despite the noise, Madeline, she would not leave the apartment, and the supervisor started coming less and less, and she started calling less and less, but she was still dealing with this crying baby that one of her neighbors had. So basically, she decided to just deal with the crying. Now, Madeline herself had 3 children, the oldest being Greg, followed by Sabrina, and then there was Andre. In 1988, she had actually given up her children for adoption due to the fact that she wasn't making a lot of money and she really couldn't support the children. The last child that she gave up was Andre, and he was 12 at the time. They communicated for a little while after she had given him up, but about a year later when he was 13, they completely lost contact and they went on for 10 years without ever saying anything to each other. That was until 1999 when Andre was now 23 years old and he had a 3-year-old daughter. He decided that he wanted to reconnect with his mom. So he called up Madeline. He was like, hey mom, it's me, Andre. I know it's been a while, but I have a daughter. I would love for you to meet her. How do you feel about this? To which case Madeline replied, yeah, sure. It has been a while. I would love to meet you again. So he came over to Madeline's apartment and they met. Hey, Ma. Long time no see. Oh, my boy. It's good to see you. Where's your daughter? Oh, she's right here. Come here. Hey, Ma, this is Andrea. Oh, hi. Get that girl out of here. What? What's wrong? Get her out of here and do not bring her back. Go, leave now. Okay. Andre, let's go. Now, Andre was actually really confused about why his mom threw him out after she met his daughter, but nonetheless, he took his daughter and he left. Now, feeling at a loss because he really couldn't reconnect with his mom, Andre decided to contact his auntie, whom he had never been super close with, but he had a better relationship with her than he did his mom. Now, he and his auntie actually were just having a regular conversation, just reminiscing about old times and catching up with each other. But then Andre's auntie asked him a question that made him stop in his tracks. The question that she asked him was, hey, where's Latanisha? Now, he was confused because he had no idea who Latanisha was. Now, even though he didn't know who she was, he recognized the name. The name had stuck with him throughout his entire childhood, but he had no idea why this name was so important to him. So he asked his auntie, "Who is Latanisha?" And his auntie replied, "Your twin sister. Where is she?" Now, at this point, Andre started to freak out a little bit because those feelings from his childhood were rushing back to him. When Andre was a child, he would tell his teachers, he would tell his social workers, he would tell everybody about this person named Latanisha. But no one knew who he was talking about, and over time, eventually, everything convinced him that he made her up. And so for almost 20 years, he pushed Latanisha out of his mind, thinking that this was nothing. Feeling at another loss, he goes to his sister Sabrina. Now, when he finds Sabrina, he's asking her, "Hey, who is Latanisha?" Sabrina, she's acting as if she wants to tell him, but there's fear in her eyes. She's literally horrified and she's shaking. She cannot tell him anything. After he found that she wasn't going to tell him anything, that's when he made the decision to tell her that he was going to get an investigator to find out who Latanisha was. And upon hearing this, Sabrina finally broke down. Meanwhile, Madeline sat in her hoarded and very messy apartment in Brooklyn. The 60-year-old woman made it a point not to really do much of anything in life as she kind of secluded herself to her apartment. And on this day, November the 5th, 1999, it was no different. She sat in her apartment. She was trying to find peace, but she was becoming upset because that doggone baby was still screaming. She would beat on the walls and she would go, "Hey, stop that baby from screaming all the time." But no matter how much she beat, the crying never stopped. So as she sat in her living room with clothes and trash and paper strewn all across the floor, she heard a knock at the door. Madeline got up from the couch, she walked to the door, and she opened it to be greeted by a few members from the cold case squad. "Oh, hello. How can I help you?" "Hi, I'm here with the cold case squad. We got a tip about some suspicious activity, and we have a warrant. We need to search your apartment." "Oh, sure, come in." So the members of the cold case squad, they went into Madeline's house and they stepped over the heaps of trash and paper and just mess all over the house until they got to a bolted door. Now, when they asked Madeline what this door was, she replied it was a closet. And then they would have asked her why is the closet door bolted, but she really didn't have much of an answer for them. Madeline's anxiety started to go through the roof as the team started to pry open the door. She started to hyperventilate and sweat and became increasingly more nervous as they pried this door open. And finally, after some time and a loud crack, the door opened, and with all the pressure and anxiety that Madeline was feeling, she fainted. Now, there were some people there who actually attended to her after she passed out, but they were much more interested in what they found inside of this closet. Inside this closet, they found a ton of air fresheners, the little trees, strewn all over the closet. And at the bottom of the closet, near the back, they found a small trunk. When they were able to open the trunk, they found this bundle of plastic bags, newspaper, and a baby blanket. Once they were able to get everything off of this bundle, they found the body of 3-year-old Latanisha Carmichael, Andre's twin. Based on the date of the newspaper, which was November the 4th, 1979, and the day they found the body, which was November the 5th, 1999, they pretty much concluded she had been there for quite exactly 20 years. Now, if you guys are here, you're probably wondering, was the baby that she heard screaming this entire time, was that a ghost? What did Sabrina tell Andre? Who tipped off the police? And what did the oldest son, Greg, have to do with any of this? Y'all, the story gets wild. Welcome to part 2 of the disappearance of Latanisha Carmichael. This section is entitled The Kids. For this section, I'm going to have to take you back to the 70s. So as we know, Madeline actually had 4 kids. That was Greg, the oldest, Sabrina, the second oldest, and then there was Andre and Latanisha, which were the twins. During the earlier years, Madeline was actually very abusive to the children. This would include her doing things like hitting the children, verbally abusing the children, and much worse. It was no secret that her favorite child out of all four of her children was the oldest, Greg. Not only was he the oldest, but Madeline would often use him as the muscle, meaning when she herself could not beat the younger kids, she would inform Greg to do it, and he happily obliged. Madeline and Greg would actually often take turns beating on the other children. And these attacks were vicious. They would use their fists, they would stomp, they would kick, anything they could. This leads us to November the 4th of 1979. Madeline had made some food for the children to eat, and she set the food out so they can all have some. While it's not entirely known if Latanisha had eaten too much food or if she wasn't hungry altogether, but what we do know that at one point in time on this day, there was some food that Madeline wanted Latanisha to eat. And Latanisha, she just didn't want to eat it. Being 3 years old, she told her mom she wasn't hungry, she didn't want to eat the food, and Madeline was not having it. So when Latanisha tried to eat this food, she threw up, and Madeline flew into a rage. It was at this point in time that Madeline struck Latanisha. Using her fist and whatever was around her that she could put her hands on, she began to viciously and mercilessly beat Latanisha. Latanisha fell to the floor and Madeline began to punch and kick the 3-year-old child. And as if it wasn't enough that Madeline herself was beating her 3-year-old daughter mercilessly, she called Greg to come and help her. So Greg got up from what he was doing. He walked over to where Madeline was beating on 3-year-old Latanisha, and he helped his mom beat the 3-year-old girl into a pulp. Now, while this beating was going on, Sabrina, who was just a few years older, was watching horrified at her mom and her older brother beating her younger sister. But with this crippling fear that her mom and her older brother would turn this rage onto her, Sabrina, she stayed where she was. And the pair continued to beat the young girl. They kicked her over and over again until some point everything went silent. Now, when everything went silent, that's when they knew that they had gone a little too far. Madeline ordered Greg to stop, and then she told Greg to try to resuscitate her. Now, being a child himself, Greg didn't really know much of what he was doing, and so Madeline stepped in. After she did all she could do, she tried to breathe into her mouth and do some compressions on her chest, but it was too late. Latanisha had passed. Now, Sabrina watched in horror as her mom picked up the lifeless body of 3-year-old Latanisha and took her to the back, and she dared her never to speak of this. It was at this point that Madeline took 3-year-old Latanisha to the back, wrapped her in cellophane, plastic, and newspaper, and put her inside of a chest and hid her in a closet, and thus beginning a very dark family secret. Now, as the days turned into weeks, Andre would occasionally ask, "Where's Latanisha?" Every time he asked Madeline about Latanisha, she just brushed it off. "Mom, where's my sister? Where's Latanisha?" "You silly big-headed child. You don't have a sister. Get that out of your head." And even when Andre would ask about her a little more incessantly, she would have Greg beat him up. Now, when he eventually enrolled in school, because remember, he was only 3 when this happened, he would occasionally tell the teachers and even some of the counselors that he had a sister named Latanisha. But no one had any records of this, and so they would tell him, "You don't." But he always responded, "Yes, I do have a sister named Latanisha." "Oh, hey, Andre. What are you drawing?"
It's my sister Latanisha.
"Andre, you don't have a sister."
Yes, I do.
Do you think maybe you saw this Latanya?
Latanisha.
LaQuashaya?
Latanisha.
Latanisha? Do you think you've seen Latanisha in your dreams?
Maybe I have dreams.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Ever had a dreams that you want him to do you so much?
And after years and years of everyone telling him this person does not exist, he eventually accepted that Latanisha was just a figment of his imagination. And then eventually, he forgot about Latanisha altogether. But the name still stuck at the back of his head. And what's even worse, he eventually forgot almost everything that happened to him before the age of 6 or 7. He has no memory of his childhood whatsoever. Now, Andre actually had an aunt who he was much closer with than his actual mom. He actually hadn't spoken to her in a while, and so they reconnected. Their conversation was nice and normal until his auntie asked him about his sister Latanisha. Now, when she asked him, he was confused because who is this Latanisha? He hadn't heard this name in years at this point in time. Now, being confused because he doesn't know who Latanisha is, he decided to go ask his mom, Madeline. Mom. Yes, baby. Is it true? Is what true? I just talked to Auntie. She said I have had a twin sister. Is it true? No. You do not have another sister. Don't lie to me, Mom. Is it true? I said it's not true. You are the only one. Don't lie to me! Andre, if you ask me again, you will regret it. You know what? I'm gonna get the truth from you, whether you like it or not. The only thing you're gonna get out of me is these hands. Greg! Yes, mother. Beat this nigga ass. With pleasure, mother. Yes, becoming frustrated with his questions, she ordered her oldest son, Greg, to beat him up. And Greg happily obliged. At some point in time, Sabrina had actually been put up for adoption, so she was no longer at the house. This is important to note because about 6 months later, Madeline had some money go missing. It was $400 that she had set aside so she can pay the rent for that month. She looked up and down, tore the apartment apart, went through her purse, retraced her steps, but she could not come across this money. Now, since Sabrina was already out of the house, Madeline's first thought was, Andre must have stole my money. Now, when she came to this conclusion, Andre was at school. That didn't stop Madeline, so she got Greg and ordered Greg to go to the school to search Andre. Greg arrived at the school, he found Andre, and he made Andre strip all of his clothes off while he searched him. Even when he was unable to find the $400 on Andre, that didn't stop Greg from mercilessly beating up Andre. Keep in mind, he was only about 12 years old. It was because of this incident that Madeline decided to finally put Andre up for adoption, and by the time he was 13, he was gone. And for 10 long years, he never talked to his mom again. Now, from the time he was taken out of his house on his 13th birthday, no less, he was raised by a wonderful woman. Her name was Dolores Lewis. For the first time in his entire life, he actually was raised on love, and Dolores, she molded him into a very good young man. He met and married his girlfriend Bronzetta, and together they had a daughter named Andrea, the very same daughter from the beginning of the story. It was because of the birth of his daughter Andrea that he even wanted to reconnect with his own mom. Andrea was born in 1996, and when she was a little girl, she used to do things that Andre thought was a little weird. Though Andrea had never actually met Andre's dad, so her grandfather, there were plenty of times where she would be playing with this imaginary friend who she claimed was Andre's dad. He would tell Andrea, no, my dad already died, but that didn't stop her. She knew who she was playing with. Just to add to the initial visit, when he was visiting his mom with his daughter Andrea, he actually brought one of Bronzetta's children with him as well. This other child's name was Dominique, and he noted that Madeline treated Dominique with the utmost respect, but Andrea, she despised her. He also noted that his daughter Andrea, when she walked into the house, she was very afraid of something that he didn't know what. She wouldn't leave his side, and she wouldn't even go to the bathroom because she felt there was a presence inside of Madeline's house. That entire time, they didn't even know that his twin sister's body was in the closet. It was there that the mom also noticed that his daughter looked just like him, and in turn looked just like his twin, the girl that she murdered. That's the reason why she didn't want him to bring his daughter back over to her house. And it's also the crying that she heard constantly for 20 years. And just to reiterate, he went and talked to his auntie. She told him about his twin, and then he went to his sister Sabrina. Now, Sabrina, she was so scared of telling the truth that before she even told him anything, she actually made Andre sign a contract that he would not go to the police if she told him the truth. Even being 20 years later, she was so scared that her mom and their older brother Greg would come back and kill her. Andre initially agreed, but once he found out how horrible the information was, he immediately ripped up the contract, and he and his sister contacted the cold case unit. And they were the ones that showed up at Madeline's house due to that tip earlier in the story. Now for court. Court itself was a 10-day trial, and there was a lot of testimony. The defense argued that they couldn't trust the testimony of an 8-year-old girl, meaning Sabrina, from 20 years ago. She made it up. Even though it was clear evidence that Latanisha's body had been beaten, they argued because it's been so many years, can you actually prove that she was beaten? Now, they discovered during their investigation that there was child welfare checks that was done on them several times for Sabrina, Andre, and Latanisha. What Madeline was doing was she actually had another young girl pretending to be Latanisha for these welfare checks. And no one ever suspected a thing. Andre broke down in court because he had finally been validated for all these feelings that he had over the years, that there was a missing part of him. And he had a lot of resentment for his mom and his older brother who killed his twin sister. Also, it broke him down a little more that he found out that before his dad died in 1996, the same year that his daughter Andrea was born, his dad had been looking for him and his twin sister, never knowing the fate of his children. As Madeline said in court, she only had daggers in her eyes at one person, Andre. Her and Greg pled not guilty, but in the end, they were both actually found guilty. Madeline was sentenced to 15 years, and Greg was convicted of negligent homicide, and he was only sentenced to 1 3/4 to 4 years in prison. And that, my friends, is a very horrible story of the disappearance of Latanisha Carmichael. I do want to thank y'all for coming and watching this video. If you guys are here from TikTok, sorry for making you guys wait a whole week. There's actually a really funny story about why that is. I originally was doing the video for just TikTok. And then right when I was recording the beginning of it, I looked up one other thing. I was trying to find the sentencing because I realized I didn't have the sentencing. And then I came across this whole other storyline. I was like, crap. And it was just going to be too long. So that's the reason why I did it this way. I will not do this again because, as you guys know, I do not do part 2s. But I had to for today. And I thank you guys for being patient with me. I thank you guys for following with me. I thank you guys for supporting me always. I have just started a Facebook page for my videos as well. So if you guys are on Facebook, be glad to look that up. It's Alan the Storyteller. And I'm going to link the correct Alan the Storyteller to it because there's another identical Alan the Storyteller that was made by someone else using all of my pictures and videos and everything. So sorry about that. But I do want to thank you guys once again. I have some exciting developments to go over with you guys, which I will probably be going live with you to tell you about that. Just follow with me and you guys be safe. I love you and I hope you have a good day. Bye.